Okay. Hello everyone. I'm Gillian Martin. I'm the MSP for Aberdeenshire East in Scottish Parliament, and I'm also the convener of the cross-party group in Women in Enterprise. And we're partnering today with the Commission on Gender Economy, and we are here to talk about the Commission's most recent report, which is entitled Creating a Caring Economy, a Call to Action. Now, we have three speakers with us today. We have got Angela O'Hagan, who's the Commissioner for the Commission on Gender Equal Economy, Emma Rich, the Chief Executive of Engender, and Carolyn Curry, the Executive Director of Women in Enterprise. Women in Enterprise is also the Secretariat for that cross-party group I mentioned. I just want to go to each of you briefly, just to sort of just for you to introduce yourselves, and then we can I've got a little bit of an introduction to put the report in context. So if I come to Angela first.
Hi, hello, thanks very much, Gillian, and thank you very much, colleagues, for this opportunity. My day job is at Glasgow Caledonian University in the Social Sciences Department, and I'm also Deputy Director of the Wise Centre for Economic Justice. And I suppose for full disclosure, I also am the independent chair of the Scottish Government's Equality Budgets Advisory Group.
And I'll come to Emma.
Thanks, Gillian. Hi, I'm Emma Rich. I'm Director of Engender. We work on women's economic equality as well as social and cultural equality and political equality. And we've been an organisation for 27 years. I've been really delighted to be part of the Women's Budget Group work. When they visited Scotland, took part in a roundtable with them. So very excited to hear more about this report and the impact that it's going to have in Scotland.
And Carolyn.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Curry. I'm the Chief Exec of Women's Enterprise Scotland. We work to create an environment where more women can start up in business and thrive. And that's critically important because at the minute, majority women-owned businesses are only 20% of the business base in Scotland, which in this day and age is really a pretty shocking gender gap. So our focus is really to get out there and tackle that. And I am really looking forward to hearing more about the detail of the report, because we see some significant opportunities in the enterprise landscape to really make a difference for women in terms of their career progression, their career opportunities, and also to tackle that pesky gender gap in enterprise participation.
Well, thank you all. So this is the latest in a series of really interesting and vital reports about women's inequality, particularly in the economy. And this one, Creating a Caring Economy, comes at a time in which care is something that we've all really been thinking about, particularly over the last 6 months, because it's really been in our faces about how care and the caring profession and the care of individuals in society is been so vital. It's always been vital, but it is particularly vital now. The report outlines 8 steps necessary to create an economy that values care, values women's work, and see it as central to creating a more equal society, and one in which underpins sustainability, well-being, prosperity for all, national economic growth, and in that space as well is about a greener economy as well. And as I read it, I thought, if I was building a nation from scratch, this would be quite the blueprint. But as that thought popped into my head, I was reminded of there's an anecdote, and it was made into a joke by, I think it was the Irish comedian Dave Allen. For those of you as old as me, you will remember Dave Allen, and it was a story he told, and I think he stopped and asked for directions in Dublin, and to this old guy in the street, and he asked how he could get to Grafton Street, and the old boy said, "Well, if I was going to Grafton Street, I wouldn't start from here," you know. And that for some reason that joke just popped into my mind, because if I was going for creating a caring economy, this isn't a magic place to start, because we have got, you know, endemic inequality. We've got a situation where we've got entrenched systems, inherently unequal, skewed towards protecting the interests of wealthy men, from what I can see. We've got a system that economically benefits hugely from large proportions of care being done for free by women. We've got a global pandemic thrown into the mix, in which women are bearing the brunt of that in lots of ways. And we've got Brexit looming as well, and that's already been seen to potentially be affecting women's work and the care profession and the caring professions as well. And that's all exacerbating all the inequalities that already exist. So our starting point's a bit of a nightmare, but we still need to get to Grafton Street, don't we? So getting there is urgent, but it's going to be difficult because of everything that I've just mentioned. So I think in terms of talking about that, that's a negative place to start, but it seems like the urgency is there, but the difficulty can't be underestimated, because we've got to unravel all those unequal systems that benefit people who are not interested in women's equality. We're going to look at this from a Scottish lens today, given the devolution settlement, and I'm always interested to look for where we can act in the Scottish governmental sphere, but also to campaign for change in areas where it's more difficult to act. And I was pleased to see the report make specific reference to devolved governments needing more borrowing powers and action on the UK tax structures that we currently don't have any influence over. So with that, I think I'll hand over to Angela, who's going to give us a summary of the report and the main points in it. Angela.
Thanks very much, Gillian. I'll see if, oh crikey, better make sure I've got the right PowerPoint here. And this horrible start of every presentation on Zoom. Okay, is that us? Can everybody see my slides? Excellent, good. Not bad for this time on a Friday. So thank you very much again, and thank you for that introduction, Gillian. We're really, I mean, you've covered the domains that we have been looking at rather through the Commission on a Gender Equal Economy. And our report is very much a call to action. Everybody on this, in this webinar, in this meeting, are well versed in the gendered inequalities that persist in Scotland. We've been talking about them for a long time. There has been a lot of movement, but there still needs to be a lot more action. And the report that we've produced touches on, speaks to all public policy domains, devolved and reserved, but reinforces, I think, all the way through that gender is relevant to fiscal competence, food security, transport, trade, housing, education, social care and support, healthcare, well-being, and of course, women's place in the economy as paid and unpaid workers, as women in business, as women as workers across all areas of the labour market, where they continue to face entrenched occupational segregation and the rest. And our focus on care, because this has been one of the challenges, why have you called it a caring economy? Is that not reinforcing gendered stereotypes because it's women that do most of the care, so you're only speaking to women? No, we're not only speaking to women. This report speaks directly across all areas of public policy. And it shows the extent to which care is central to the economy, as well as all our lives as individuals. And one of the things I think it emphasises as well, and this was drawn out by the chair of the Commission at last week's launch, that for a long time we've had the narrative on how central care is to the economy. Increasingly though, we have the numbers. So there is even more so an economic imperative to act. And we know that, you know, so in relation to women in enterprise, we know from a range of data, we know from the excellent policy work by Women in Enterprise Scotland, by Anne Meikle and other organisations across Scotland, we know that many of the reasons why women turn to self-employment or to starting their own business are related to care. The lack of flexible working for women with young children or other dependents, long-term caring responsibilities for partners, parents and others, the absence of work-life balance in many workplaces, as well as the direct discrimination, especially pregnancy and maternity related, as well as persistent harassment that women experience across many workplaces. So as I say, our call to action for a caring economy now takes aim at all of those issues in an 8-step approach to an economy that puts care at the core and delivers on gender equality, sustainability and well-being. And in Scotland, we have, we might not be starting from off Grafton Street, but we have, I think, we have to use the positives we have, and one of which is a very strong rhetoric across Scottish Government and the political parties, a strong rhetoric supporting or engaging in sustainability, gender equality and well-being. So we need to use that rhetoric and some of the policy that stems from that as a platform to build on in Scotland. The Commission itself started last year, so 18 months from coming together to the production of the final report, so no wonder everybody's quite tired. And under the chair of Professor Diane Elson, who some of you will know well in Scotland, she's a visiting professor at the Economic Justice, and no stranger to many of you in the Scottish Parliament and Scottish Government, having been part of many discussions on gendering Scotland's economy over the years. Our commissioners were drawn from across the 4 nations of the UK, underlining what has been an approach to draw on the divergence and synergies across the UK to inform policy and potential across the UK. And my fellow commissioners were from a range of civil society, academic, trade union, business organisations, media organisations and elsewhere. And there's a really rich repository of expert briefings and submissions of evidence available to you all on the Commission website, and I thoroughly commend those papers to you. There's as I say, a really rich and detailed analysis across a range of public policy issues. And as well as taking this 4 nations approach, our approach was one of trying to understand and look to the evidence of and the realities produced by the intersections of structural inequalities that gender, race, class, disability combine to produce conditions that affect the life chances, the life experiences of women and men differently, with different characteristics, different lived experiences, and understanding that as a structural problem rather than necessarily one of identity or only identity, but understanding those structures further implicates government and public policy and public institutions in public agencies in remedying it. So our vision puts a caring economy, and the emphasis there is equal on caring and the economy, sending a very clear message that we need to understand care is fundamental to our economy and to the economic model we currently have, flawed as it is, because it fails to recognise that centrality of care. And that if we are in our endeavour to create a caring economy, we will deliver on gender equality, a sustainable economy and a well-being economy. And our vision, we hope, is inclusive. It's about an economy that delivers and improves, but delivers well-being through meeting care needs, because we all give and receive care at different times in our lives and in different ways. In terms of our economic development and our economic growth and sustainability, investing in care provides significantly enhanced returns than investment in other areas of the economy. 2.7 times as many jobs in the economy overall compared to equivalent investment in construction. 6.3 times more jobs for women and over 1.1 times jobs for men. So investing in care is not a secondary soft option, but has real economic bite. And it's also sustainable in terms of environmental interests and Scotland's climate change targets. Investing in care is 3 times less polluting per job than the equivalent investment in the construction or other industries. So our vision is about prioritising the care of one another and the environment we live in. A caring economy ensures that everyone has time to care as well as time free from care. And you only need to scroll through Twitter or listen to the many ways in which the voices of carers are being heard informally, and time pressures on people who are unpaid carers, and how that pressure on their physical health, their mental health, and their time to do anything but care, you know, to go and get a haircut, to go and have a coffee with a friend, has been even more compromised in the recent pandemic. We also want to realise a vision where a caring economy enables men to unpaid care equally. And in the polling that we did for the Commission, you'll be interested to know that in Scotland, there was 85% support for the men and women should share care tasks equally, and 3 out of 4 men agreeing that a better balance was needed. So a call to action for all those men who are signing up for an equal sharing of care. And we also, in a caring economy, underline that care services are crucial, but a caring economy goes beyond that. But it is, of course, predicated on investment, public investment in social care and support. So as Gillian has said, it's an 8-step proposition to re-envision what we mean by the economy. And that's about engaging as well the public opinion and public understanding of what we mean by the economy, to include the value of unpaid work, that there should be well-being indicators in when we're counting what our economic success is. We should be looking at we should be looking at the well-being of the country and of our people. That cost and productivity needs to be thought of differently. I always think of this when others, think tanks and others, are saying, well, we need to boost our productivity. And I think, yes, let's ask a woman caring for her family in the multiple ways that women do while running several part-time jobs, all of which are minimum wage or below minimum wage. Ask her how she thinks she should improve her productivity. Or not. Let's actually recognise the contribution that she makes and the conditions in which women are trying to make a decent living and sustain a livelihood. And that means that we need policy that takes into account the impact on care, paid and unpaid, and that equality's impact are the starting point for policy making, not an occasional add-on post hoc. So very quickly, I know I'm up against time. We need to be investing in social care and physical infrastructure. That means fully funding public services, investing in the care and support to deliver a universal care service, funding for childcare that is free, universal, flexible and appropriate, appropriate funding for healthcare, and funding violence against women and girls services, funding for social housing, and appropriate social housing that meets the diverse range of households and individuals across Scotland. Investing in green public transport. And our third step is to transform the worlds of paid and unpaid work, and that means combining work and care in part by improving the legal entitlements to leave for caring and for looking after others, to reduce the full-time working week and address the massive overworking that occurs in our economy, introduce a wage floor, and to encourage greater diversity of business ownership and models of enterprise, so including self-employment that is sustainable self-employment and includes social enterprise and cooperatives. Investing in a caring dignity and autonomy. Now in Scotland, that language is no longer strange to us in talking about social security. That's very much how social security is being framed in Scotland. That's the ambition and the aspiration. We have a way to go there. But again, it's one of the areas of divergence, I think, certainly rhetorically in the Commission's work. Gillian touched on taxation and the need to transform taxation. One of the key recommendations in the report is for governments to restore a 24% rate of corporation tax, which is currently at 19% and amongst the lowest in the G7 and the G20, which has to be addressed. That loss of wealth, that loss of income. It's also, when we think about it in terms of the requirement for duty bearers to ensure the realisation of rights, maximisation of economic resources. So if we're looking at it from perspective, governments have a duty to be maximising publicly available resources, and addressing the taxation system is one of those ways. Gillian's already mentioned borrowing powers for devolved governments. One of the recommendations in the refocusing of fiscal and monetary policy. That also we recommend including well-being indicators as part of our fiscal governance. Working to develop a trade system that's socially and environmentally sustainable, and that means in a post-Brexit world and a post-Brexit Scotland, ensuring that public services are not negotiable, are not part of our trade giveaways in current and future negotiations. And that in working to transform the international economic system, there's a lot of work to do in terms of UN national accounts, overseas development assistance, and so on. Oh, I've gone the wrong way there, sorry. So, opportunities in Scotland. The Scottish Government is one of the founding members of the Wellbeing Economy Governments Group, along with New Zealand, Iceland, and most recently Wales. So again, a lot of rhetoric, a lot of thinking, a lot of analysis from the Commission report. The Scottish National Investment Bank has been a particular focus of mine, and I know Engender have a strong interest there as well. And the Scottish National Investment Bank also featured in the principles from Engender, Close the Gap, and others on ensuring a gendered approach to recovery. So we need to be seeing investment in care as a legitimate form of investment in business. The Fair Work Agenda provides a framework, and this Commission report provides some very specific recommendations around particularly work-life balance, parental and other caring leave measures. Scotland's climate change targets, we have the ambition and we have the boast, if you like, about our climate change targets. So bringing that together with gender justice and economic justice is one of our challenges. Embedding all of this inequalities and human rights analysis in our budget processes and policy making is imperative. That's a long road that we've been on, but we still have quite a way to go. Social security in Scotland, we have the opportunity and potential of very strong rhetoric there, and a commitment to ensuring a social security system in Scotland based on human rights and the dignity and respect for the individual. We've seen some, again, divergence from Scotland. Carers allowance in Scotland has been increased, and there's the additional carers allowance supplement, but we know that that's not universal. Not all carers have been eligible for that, but it's that Scotland has taken and shown where it can use devolved powers, but could of course go much further. So to end on the political interest here, and in the chat just before we started broadcasting, we were talking about an election coming up. Now what we can see is that these ideas from the Commission on Gender Equality, the product of a bunch of remote feminists cut off from understanding of the real world. Public support for these measures is strong. People, whether it's coming out of the pandemic or because people are sick and tired of seeing the withdrawal of public services through austerity and the pressures on public services, So across the UK, 68% of people are saying that wellbeing should be used to measure the success of economic policy. And almost 80% agree that a better balance is needed. Now that figure is higher in Scotland. We also see that 3 in 4 people across the UK agree that economic equality between women and men is the mark of a good society, and that provision of social care, health and education is important, and that 82% agree that social care should be available to everyone. In Scotland, 87% of people believe that provision of quality care is the mark of a good society. 80% and men should share tasks equally, and that a better balance is needed. And that when it comes to social care, accessible, quality social care based not on wealth, but on needs, has the support of 85% of people in Scotland. And how do we fund it? There's 80% support in Scotland for tax to fund higher living wage, and 69, almost 70% for funding for childcare, and 80% support for tax increases for health and social care. So when it comes to saying we can't really have a conversation on tax, we absolutely have to have a conversation on tax. And for those of the politicians amongst you having that conversation, going into that conversation, knowing that there's that level of public support. So I'll stop there and leave, and I'm happy to share these slides on, and there's my details and the details for Marion Sharples, the project manager for the Commission, and the reference to obviously the Twitter hashtags, and where you'll find all the documentation related to the Commission report. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Angela. So ahead of coming to my other two panelists, just a reminder to people that have joined us that you can ask questions. We're going to do a Q&A at the end of the session. There's a box that you can put in Q&A what your question is. If it's specifically directed at someone, say so. If it's just for the panel as a whole, then just put your question in there, and I'll come to them at the end, and we'll choose a couple and put them to our panelists. I want to bring in Emma and Carolyn here. I mean, in this report, there's an awful lot in there that I've heard both of you speak about in the past in the campaign you're doing. How do you think this report sort of augments and helps the campaigning that the two of you have already been doing on this over the years? Can I come to Emma first?
I mean, we're delighted at Engender to see the Women's Budget Group undertake this piece of work. I think it's been a really credible commission. It's brought together a lot of expertise. We've had obviously our Angela very much involved with that piece of work, if I could put it like that, Dr. O'Hagan representing Scotland. And we've obviously had a kind of Scotland bit of it, in that the commission came to Scotland and we talked about what's happening here and what's going on. But you're absolutely right, Gillian, this is very reflective thematically of a lot of work that has been happening in Scotland over time. And Angela mentioned some principles that Close the Gap and Engender developed, along with support from other national women's organisations, including the Women's Budget Group, to make the case for a gender competent recovery from COVID that would take account of women's and men's different life experiences. And we really focused in on a lot of the ground that is in the Commission's report, which I think is really helpful, and coming together of a lot of the work that's been going on across the UK and internationally. We're very mindful that COVID has exposed very deep fissures in society that have long existed. And I think really brought to the surface what you described, Gillian, in your introduction as this dependence of the so-called real economy on the unpaid care work of women. And so the economy is kind of balanced on the backs of women working unpaid as carers, doing childcare, ensuring that households can be out at work in the daytime, provisioned with goods from the supermarket, and all of the rest of the things that women do every day. So we've been very, very mindful that COVID has displaced a lot of the care work that has been done by paid carers onto women unpaid. And we've seen a really staggering increase in the number of carers, but also the intensification of care work. So while this report, I think, is in the grain of a lot of work that's already been happening in Scotland, I think it's so welcome at this time when the 4 nations of the UK face very difficult and challenging decisions about how best to expend their resources. I think we remain hopeful that there is an opportunity to think about recovery in new ways, but we are seeing some kind of return to the usual toolboxes of spending on construction projects, the kind of shovel-ready project rather than the care-ready project. And I think Diane Elson at the launch of this report said, we've clapped for carers, we haven't paid for them. So I think that is the real shift that we now need to see.
Okay, thank you, Emma. Carolyn.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, really. I think we are facing, you know, an urgent need to take action now. And here's a report that sets out the path that needs to be taken. So, you know, let's just stop talking about it and get on it, because, you know, there is an urgency like no other with COVID, you know, right on top of us. And women are severely disadvantaged by the impacts of COVID. You know, as Emma says, it is exposing all the existing fault lines that we know about, and therefore it is imperative that we start to act. Our years of hard work on equality are going to be absolutely set to the side, and who wants to be the generation that leaves that legacy for the next generation coming through? So, you know, this really is a serious call for action now, which is quite different to other times when we think we've had time to debate the issues. Well, we don't. We need to get absolutely on it right at the moment. You know, in terms of women's enterprise, you know, the positive statistics pre-COVID, where the, you know, women were already contributing 8.8 billion every year into the Scottish economy. That's about 5% of GDP. But in addition to that, women have contributed over 230,000 jobs in Scotland, these women-owned businesses. Now, that is about 11% of private sector employment. And at a time where jobs are under threat, women-owned businesses absolutely need help and support to keep going. Now, many women start up in sectors where they've got experience of working in. So, you know, this report highlighting the care sector is very relevant for lots of women that are running their own businesses. The report recommendations would enable these businesses to grow and to create more jobs, and it would also encourage more women to be able to uptake a career in self-employment and business startup, which just simply isn't an option for them at the moment, given the lack of support for women-owned businesses currently. And, you know, I've said it's urgent to look at this in the COVID landscape. The most recent research shows that 23% of women-owned businesses remain closed after, you know, lockdown has been lifted in Scotland. And, you know, that's just 14% in comparison for male-owned businesses. And absolutely shockingly, 42% of women-owned businesses do not intend to take a salary in the next 12 months. Now, that is not economically sustainable. So we really need to act now. And this report sets out a clear pathway to put investment into the care sector, which would benefit many women-owned businesses and would really lead to an increase in women's entrepreneurship, greater gender equality, and help the economy as a whole. And it's not just about doing the morally right thing. In terms of productivity in our economy, gender equality, you know, gender diversity is a driver of radical, novel, step change innovation. Now, we know our productivity is lacking as a nation. So more women in the business ecosystem is going to make a huge second uplift in terms of our economy, not just all the great statistics that Angela has talked about in terms of the uplift and the opportunities there, but we would then get a second uplift by having greater gender equality across the business ecosystem.
There's one thing I want to come back to the two of you on. And as we're talking about things that are in the devolved space here, there's a number of things that jump out at me as being things that have maybe been done differently. So we've got the 1140 hours, first of all. We've got most recently had discussions, particularly from like Angela Constance has been pushing the National Care Service. We've got a pledge from the government on equality and fairer Scotland budget statement. And these three and there's more, but there's these three things. So first of all, in the budget statement, are we in a fit state to assess how the budget's been deployed in terms of gender equality? Is the 1140 hours, is it sufficient? Well, I would say no, because it has to be 100%. But in terms of the fiscal setup and the borrowing, whatever, what could be there for us in terms of if we had borrowing powers to put into that to increase it? And another thing on top of that, it's a very long-winded question, I apologise, but is there anything about the 6 months of the pandemic that we've had where some of the arguments that we've all been making for years, particularly around flexible working, whatever, we've been proved right? But as Emma said, we're slipping back in them. So those things are in the mix in the devolved space. Can I have your assessment and your thoughts on what I've just mentioned? I'll come to Carolyn.
Okay, well, yes, you know, we need to use all the levers at our disposal right now in order to drive change. And I think, you know, a key part of this, my colleague Anne Meikle would most definitely be saying, we need more, better, sustained equality impact assessment. You know, all too often we roll out initiatives, but we don't measure them. We don't look at them through a gendered lens. We have for years had an ambition to drive and create an inclusive economy. Now, inclusion, women are at the heart of having an inclusive economy. And if we can't in all these years actually have a dashboard of measurement that shows how we're doing, then we're failing before we start. So, you know, any measures that we take in terms of actions have to actually be measured themselves in order that we can cast a lens into what is working, where's the best practice, but also where are the gaps? You know, in this COVID landscape, we are simply not going to have enough resources for all the needs that are out there. So we have to get really smart in understanding where the gaps are in support and making sure that we have support that is getting straight to the heart of those gaps. And, you know, that would certainly be our call, that we need to measure the support that has gone out there already, and we need to understand where the gaps are, and we need to take clear action on them. And I'm sure it'll come as no surprise that I think this report has a series of actions that would almost certainly help with some of those gaps that are out there in our economy currently.
Emma.
I mean, on your specific questions, Gillian, I think 1140 isn't enough. And one of the things Engender has advocated for is 50 hours a week of childcare. And that's something which has been taken up by the National Advisory Council on Women and Girls, and Scottish Government is going ahead with planning for the next phase post 1140 rollout. I mean, 1140 is absolutely to be welcomed, but it just doesn't, it's not equivalent to the full-time working day and with wraparound, so it doesn't enable all families to make the choices they want to about work-life balance. I think in terms of the discussion around the National Care Service, this is something which we really welcome, but I think obviously the detail is going to be very important, and we want whatever delivery mechanism will deliver independent, dignified lives to disabled women, but also obviously will enable women who are otherwise kind of being dragooned into to do unpaid care, whether they want to or not, will enable them to make real choices about how they want their lives to be. And on the equality budget statement, I mean, Angela can obviously give a much more rich assessment than I can, but I think that it isn't quite doing all we want it to do. We haven't yet got gender budget analysis deeply integrated into the Scottish budget. And I think despite some of the methodologies that have been tested in the last couple of years, we're still seeing it a bit more as a kind of post hoc descriptor of spend on equality activity, which is to be welcome and still the first in the UK, but I think we're slipping behind some of our European comparator countries, and I think it's an area of work where I wish all power to EBAG's elbow to continue to drive that forward. I think we need better, as Carolyn said, impact assessment, and we certainly need better gender budget analysis to ensure, as Angela pointed out, that some of the very sensible economic decisions about investment in care are actually reflected in our budget process.
And that's going to be key in getting the support for the recommendations. Can I come to Angela on that specific point around the budget? I mean, you obviously you're wanting to get political support for what's all the recommendations that are in this report, and certainly I'm right behind you on that. But in terms of actually getting support on the sense that they make economically, that measuring is really important, isn't it, Angela?
Yes, it is. Sorry, I was doing that Zoom thing of not unmuting. Absolutely. I think there's a number of things there. One is about the transparency. No, before we get to the budget documentation, is the requirement for the need for and compliance with the requirements. But I think beyond compliance, this is about better policy making and better allocation of public resources to have better outcomes. And if the starting point is that we want equality and human rights to be realised, if we have that narrative of social justice in Scotland, so that needs to be the starting point for policy making. How will what is being proposed advance the elimination of inequalities and the realisation of rights? That has to be the starting point. And when it comes to parliamentary scrutiny, that has to be the first question from parliamentarians in committees and elsewhere, to government officials and to others. How is what is being proposed going to address existing inequalities, advance the elimination of equality and the realisation of rights? Because if it's not going to do that, why are we doing it? Why are we spending public money on something that is not going to advance equality and may even, as we have seen through unintended consequences, reinforce existing inequalities and existing stereotypes? So I think there's considerable work to be done at the policy formulation, right through from early proposals and propositions all the way through to, as Carolyn has said, the evaluation of outcomes is one of the weakest areas of public policy analysis. We know that. Implementation gaps, right, left and centre, and revisiting. And it's that point about revisiting and looking at implementation and outcomes that the Budget Review Group recommendations focused on. And in the recommendations, particularly for the budget process in Parliament and parliamentary scrutiny, for elected members to look forward and back. So what has been achieved over the period of spend, not over the budget period necessarily, because we're in a single year budget setup, which is not entirely helpful, but looking back over the period of the policy commitment to do X or Y, and to see what has been achieved in that period, and then looking forward to the next round of public funding, whether that's draft budgets or spending reviews, to say, well, on the basis of the extent to which we're on track to reach the objectives that we set in agreeing the budget in years gone by, this is where we need to be reorientating or continuing spend. So there is a very important role for parliamentary scrutiny. And part of that parliamentary scrutiny is also about getting in about the equality budget statement, which, as Emma has said, is not fit for purpose. And I have said that for many years, that we have a problem in that for too long, the equality budget statement was a narrative accompaniment to the budget and a kind of post hoc analysis. So since, I mean, I've been a member of EBAG for a long time, but since becoming chair, I'm pushing officials very hard and working very hard with colleagues to develop different tools and different approaches. But that also needs investment in building skills and understanding and knowledge amongst the officials. And crucially, it's about building in time to the policy process to allow for really robust equalities analysis to happen, and for that not to be time limited, last minute, allocate it to a junior member of the team because it's not really all that important. And it's also about addressing some of the culture of the organisation, where information is more readily shared and exchanged across different portfolios, and about engaging, as we see and say the world over, that our finance colleagues have to be involved in and leading this process. Because it's about ensuring that our public finance is doing the job of driving equality. And that's beyond the job of ensuring fiscal probity, absolutely. But there's a role, seeing public finance as a motor for change. And that's a shift in the mindset that we're working towards.
And making the point that inequality costs money. Inequality drives down the the prosperity of a nation. If that's your main driver, then you should be for eliminating inequality. Can I just, before we open it up to questions that anybody's got, I want to put a final thing to Carolyn and Emma. In terms of the recommendations that are in the devolved sphere, which ones do you see as being the ones that the Scottish Government need to take more action on, or need to start action on that they aren't already? I'll come to Emma first.
I mean, I think one of the first recommendations, which is changing what we think about the economy, is still something we're a bit stuck on in Scotland. So there's been some really, really helpful progress in some ways. And sorry to dive into the detail here, but the Scottish Government's Economic Recovery Implementation Plan has a really welcome commitment to creating a knowledge and skills section within the Economy Directorate to focus on this work, to generate some indicators for those to be coordinated and scrutinised by a ministerial working group. But really, that's the only equality bit in the whole of the implementation plan, which runs to over 100 pages. And I think we still see, although it's a welcome step forward, we still see equality being considered as a kind of very specialist project within economic policy making, rather than something which, as you described it, Gillian, is critical to prosperity and to growth, if that's what we want. So I think while we see social policy really much more getting to grips with the idea that gender and women's equality and rights are important, in economic policy making, I think, was still a kind of boutique issue and very marginal. And so I think would be a very important step forward. On the other stuff, I think there is some progress being made. There's some exploration of the idea of introducing daddy months in Scotland, although we don't have the powers to do that unless they're devolved. There's commitments with regards to social security and looking at care and childcare as infrastructure, although those again are rhetorical commitments without huge packages of spend necessarily being associated with them. So I think everyone's been absolutely right to note that we are further forward in terms of delivery of these in Scotland, but there's still an awful lot of work to do.
Okay, Carolyn.
So I think we've had years now of having an aspiration for inclusive economic growth. It's been in our economic strategy for a number of years. We've got that, we've got the concept. What we're not seeing is the action on the back of it. So as Emma rightly says, you know, the sectors that we look at for investment in our economy, the sectors that, you know, government will provide support to because they think it's central to our economy, the sectors that consistently get that investment, you know, are not the sectors like care. So if we are really serious about having inclusive economic growth, then now is the time to make that step change, to implement the great recommendations of this report as a first step. You know, the work that has been done here plates the route to government to give it, you know, a really quick win in achieving inclusive economic growth that would make a huge difference. We need to stop looking at the same old economic sectors and expecting an uplift and expecting economic growth to happen. We need to actually drive that step change, and this report gives us a blueprint to do exactly that. So, you know, that I think is what I see as the critical action. You know, let's move on from talking about inclusive economic growth to demonstrating how we are going to deliver it, and to actually put our money where our mouth is and provide that called for investment in the care sector. The work's been done, so let's just unlock the investment and crack on with it.
I'm going to, Marion has been collecting questions from people that are in our meeting. We have a question. Marion, could you read that out to the panelists and we can get your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Gillian. So we've had a question in about well-being and the Scottish Government's focus on well-being and concerns that it's quite a narrow understanding of well-being. And the example is how pandemic support has been withheld from the fitness sector, despite acknowledgement of the importance of mental health and fitness in managing this crisis. So developing the question from that, I guess, how do we broaden the understanding of the Scottish Government about what well-being is?
Okay, so I'll look to see who wants to come in that first. Who's digested that the quickest and would like to come in? Raise your hand.
So, yeah, I think this is a clear example of government simply not understanding the issues that are faced by women-owned businesses. I think people, as our economy has opened up, people have forgotten that there are still sectors that are closed. So, you know, in this particular case, some of the fitness and well-being sectors have only been open for 4 weeks. And indeed, still the soft play sector, for example, has never actually managed to open yet when we're going into this lockdown. And while we have rightly targeted support at some sectors that have been seen to be seriously disadvantaged, like the hospitality sector and the eat out, these other sectors in which women are the majority of business owners have received no targeted support whatsoever. So, you know, this goes back to some of the themes that we've already talked about, having a very clear gendered lens on the support that is going out and actually matching up our aspirations for inclusive growth with a dashboard that evidences whether or not support is getting here. And this is a clear case study and example of where it's not working.
Thank you. Emma.
I mean, I think just to kind of take the point a little bit further, I think that I was really quite shocked to see kind of laughter in the Westminster Parliament at the idea that beauty businesses needed some kind of special focus and attention. And I think that this idea that women's businesses are kind of trivial and fluffy, and that there are sectors of the economy that women really value as individual consumers and as business owners, they're just like trivial in comparison to things like you know, car mechanic businesses, although they're by value much more significant to our economy. I think that really shows you just how far women are outside what is understood to be the mainstreaming of business and economic thinking. So I think that that was a real wake-up call, I hope, for some people working around economic development, at just that assumptions about women's business and the value that they bring to the economy. So I really salute this cross-party group for continuing to focus on that. But it is really interesting to me that we're all together here today at a cross-party group, not on business or enterprise in Scotland, but on women's business and enterprise, because that's still, you know, a topic in and of itself. And it's right that this group should focus on that, but sad, I think, that it's still necessary.
Yeah, totally agree. And one of the things that we loathe the most is the writing off of so-called lifestyle businesses, like they're not as important. And I always say, well, you know, one of the most profitable retailers in the UK was growing out of so-called lifestyle businesses, the White Company and Cath Kidston, you know, and Laura Ashley and people like that, you know. So, you know, the high street mainstays used to be called lifestyle businesses, and what support did they ever get when they were starting out? Angela, do you want to reflect on that question?
Sure. I suppose to add a couple of other things, I think the point from the questioner about a definition of well-being, and I think it shows, again, I think we see every day the balances and the decisions that are having to be made, but about which reinforce the need to understand things in the round and understand the interrelationship of the multiple dimensions of well-being, our physical, economic, our physical, emotional, mental well-being and our economic well-being. They're not, you can't split them up and say, well, we'll get to one lot later. They all have to be seen in the round. And I think that joined up approach, to use some very old-fashioned policy language, some joined up policy making is still aspirational sometimes. But I think it also shows the importance of scrutiny of policy and the importance of having up-to-date, accurate, gendered data. So understanding the impacts on different industries, different sectors of the economy, and who is being affected differently by different areas. And by extension then, I think that also applies to parliamentary scrutiny and elsewhere, scrutiny from elsewhere of what currently is being funded and what is not going to be funded, and what funding has been promised but has no longer going to, has been committed but might not be forthcoming, and what the impacts of that might be in the third sector, in the small business sector and elsewhere. So there's again, it's about Parliament having to look forward and back on some of this.
Thank you. So we are rapidly running out of time. So I'm going to give each of you the opportunity just to say what your main asks would be. As we go into the Scottish Parliament election period and the manifestos are all being scribbled away at the moment, what do you think that should be in there from each of the parties with regard to this? I'll come to Emma first.
We are hoping to see a living wage for unpaid carers. I think carers allowance at the moment is just not enabling women to live a good life and not creating enough demand in our local economies. So that's one of the big ideas we hope to see in manifestos this season.
Thank you. Carolyn.
We're calling for women's business centres to be established, and I would hope in the context of this report that would enable many women who have experience of working in the care sector to be able to start up their own businesses and contribute more to the economy, create more than those existing 230,000 jobs, and actually help to save some valuable jobs across their local communities. But we need to put in place the bespoke support to help them do that. And if I'm being cheeky, my second ask would be obviously for that investment that Angela has called for in the care sector, because with both of these bits of investment, I really think we could kickstart the Scottish economy big style.
Thank you. And Angela, final word to you. What do you hope to see in the manifestos?
Well, no surprise, investment in care, investment in care, and public spending in care. We have the numbers, we've seen 2.7 times the return of investment in other areas. So by investing in care, we're building new facilities, we're increasing the workforce in care, and a workforce that needs to be well remunerated, have good terms and conditions. That has a knock-on effect for our tax base, as well as expanding care services and facilities has all sorts of effects on people who are looking to access paid employment in different areas of the labour market as well. Again, having a knock-on to the tax base. So for all of those who are thinking about the Infrastructure Commission and its report, the Scottish National Investment Bank, if it will eventually start grinding into gear, they need to be thinking about care and not as a soft secondary part. The care economy in Scotland employs over 200,000 people. It's 3.4 billion of our economy. And what we saw at the start of the pandemic and the start of lockdown, when care services have been withdrawn, the dramatic impact on individuals for whom, for people who've lost their care packages, and the inhuman and inhumane experiences that people have had, but also how dependent on social care and childcare we are for our economy to function. So all of this, everybody can work from home. No, everybody can't work from home. And those people who can work from home still need social care and support and childcare. So that's why we need to see some investment in care.
Thank you. Great suggestions, and we'll be making sure that this presentation is out there. People can share it. And I guess my suggestion to anyone who's looked at this report and thinks that governments should be doing these things, you have elected representatives, write to them, lobby them, and make sure that care is put at the centre of our recovery. So I want to thank you all very much for your time today. Really enjoyed listening to you. Yeah, hope to see you again. And maybe in a year's time, we'll look back on those manifestos and see if any of that made that in, or had any progress in any things that you think so important. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.